Welcome back. Today, we're diving into a story you think you know, but it is profoundly misunderstood. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We aren't just going to give you a basic high school summary here. No, we're stripping away all that dense 19th century prose and breaking this classic down into a fast-paced, highly structured 5-act explainer. So get ready for a pretty wild journey into ambition, creation, and ultimate ruin.
Picture this. Before we even meet Victor Frankenstein or his infamous monster, Mary Shelley plunges us into this freezing, totally desolate world. We are way up north of London, completely surrounded by mountains of ice and thick fog, aboard the ship of Captain Robert Walton. He's on this incredibly dangerous Arctic voyage of discovery, when suddenly, his crew spots a gigantic figure on a dog sled in the distance, and that's followed shortly by a half-frozen, starving European man. That man is Victor Frankenstein. As he slowly warms up by the ship's stove, he starts telling Walton his terrifying tale. This incredibly dark, icy backdrop is basically the perfect framing for the chilling isolation we're about to explore.
Think of this as our playbow for today's explainer. We're strictly mapping this narrative to a classic 5-act tragic structure. We've got Act 1, Ambition and Creation, Act 2, Tragedy and Encounters, Act 3, The Monster's Demand, Act 4, The Field's Companion, and finally, Act 5, The Arctic Pursuit.
All right, let's jump straight into Act 1, Ambition and Creation, the fatal spark of life.
So, we start off with Victor Frankenstein. He's this brilliant, deeply privileged student from Geneva, and he's got this boundless, almost naive optimism. He literally wants to conquer death itself. Driven by this complete, feverish obsession, he spends months just digging around in damp graveyards, dissecting rooms and slaughterhouses, gathering up bones and flesh with his bare hands. And he decides to build this creature, gigantic, about 8 feet tall, mostly because working on a normal human scale is just way too slow for his unchecked ambition. But here is the massive turning point. The exact second he actually succeeds and infuses that spark of life, he doesn't celebrate, not at all. Instead, he is just hit with breathless horror and disgust. He's so utterly terrified by the sheer ugliness of his own creation that he just immediately abandons it and runs away.
I mean, just picture this scene on a dreary night in November. The rain is pattering dismally against the window, his candle is nearly burnt out. I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. It is just a moment of pure visceral horror to witness this stitched-together giant suddenly gasp for air.
I want you to pause for a second and really think about this. Does the sheer act of creating life immediately bind you to an obligation to actually care for it? Victor acts like a terrified kid who just broke a vase, but what he's leaving behind is a fully conscious, thinking being. This absolute lack of responsibility is the catalyst for quite literally everything that follows.
Which brings us right into Act 2, Tragedy and Encounters, the consequences of abandonment.
Victor's actions catch up with him fast, sparking some deadly consequences. Fast forward 2 years. Victor actually thinks he's in the clear until he gets this utterly devastating letter from his father saying his sweet young brother William has been murdered. So Victor rushes back to Geneva. And during this massive lightning storm, he spots his massive creature lurking near the murder site and instantly knows the truth. But tragically, a beloved family servant named Justine gets framed for the crime. And because Victor knows his story sounds like absolute madness, he just stays silent. Justine is executed, completely racked with guilt and despair. Victor journeys up into the majestic icy Alps in August. And right there, ascending the glacier of Montanvert, creator and creation finally cross paths again.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the clash of these two perspectives. You've got Victor screaming at him, calling him a demon, a wretched devil, threatening to end his life right there. But then, look at the creature's incredibly eloquent response. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel. I mean, the monster completely understands his biblical equivalent. He knows he was brought into this world by a creator, but instead of being placed in a garden, he was cast out and despised. He's literally just begging Victor to listen to his story.
Let's move into Act 3, The Monster's Demand, Education and Isolation. Honestly, this is probably one of the most heartbreaking revelations of the whole explainer, and it strikes right at the core of the nature versus nurture debate. The monster actually started out benevolent. In this act, he tells Victor how he learned about the world. He lives secretly near this little cottage, chopping wood and clearing snow for a poor family, the DeLacy's. He learned language just by listening to them. His soul genuinely glowed with love. But the second he finally revealed himself, they brutally drove him away in pure terror. Later on, he even sees a little girl slipping into a rushing stream. He jumps in and saves her from drowning, and as reward for that, some rustic man aims a gun at him and shatters his flesh with a bullet. Met exclusively with violence and disgust, the creature's innate goodness just shatters into a hellish rage. He murdered young William as revenge against Victor, and now he has one demand.
The creature issues this absolutely terrifying ultimatum. My companion must be of the same species and have the same defects. This being you must create. He basically argues that his malice is born entirely out of his miserable isolation. If Victor gives him a female, they'll flee to the vast wilds of South America away from mankind forever. But if not, the monster promises to destroy the rest of Victor's loved ones.
Put yourself in his shoes for a second. If you were shunned by the entire world despite doing good deeds, wouldn't you also demand a companion? The creature is essentially just asking for the most basic, fundamental right to companionship. And Victor actually feels a sudden flash of justice for his creation, so, very reluctantly, he agrees to this dark pact.
That brings us to Act 4, the failed companion, the breaking of the vow.
So Victor drags himself all the way up to a remote, desolate little island in Scotland to start his loathsome work all over again. He's gathering up gruesome materials, his mind just sick with anxiety. But one night, while he's looking at the half-finished female, logic and absolute terror suddenly hit him. Really, for the first time, Victor considers his responsibility to humanity over his own ambition. What if she hates the original monster? What if they utterly despise each other? Or way worse, what if they breed and unleash a race of devils upon the earth? So right in front of the window where the monster is secretly watching, Victor literally tears the unfinished female companion to pieces. He breaks his promise. The creature is understandably devastated. He howls in the impotence of anger, and then delivers what has to be one of the most haunting lines in all of literature. I go, but remember, I shall be with you on your wedding night. The absolute doom is now closing in tightly around Victor.
The fallout from this broken vow is immediate, and it is devastating. In the evening, Victor destroys the female. That same night, the monster issues his threat and takes off. Victor cleans up his lab, throws the remains into the ocean, and basically just falls asleep in his boat. The very next day, he washes ashore in Ireland, only to be immediately arrested for murder. When the magistrate shows him the body, Victor realizes the monster has already struck. The victim is his dearest childhood friend, Henry Clarvel. The creature strangled him.
And that catapults us into Act 5, the Arctic pursuit, the final catastrophe.
This final act is just a relentless, devastating cascade of loss. Victor is cleared of the charges and heads back to Geneva as a broken shadow of a man. He actually goes ahead and marries his lifelong love, Elizabeth, mistakenly believing the monster's threat was aimed only at him. But on their wedding night, while Victor is nervously patrolling the halls with a pistol, a scream rings out. The monster has strangled Elizabeth, leaving her lifeless on the bridal bier. The sheer shock of this news causes Victor's elderly father to just die of grief days later. Having lost absolutely everything, Victor dedicates his last remaining breath to a relentless, freezing physical chase. He tracks the monster's taunting clues all the way to the Arctic Ocean, which brings us full circle, right back to the beginning of this explainer, on Captain Walton's icebound ship, where Victor's strength finally gives out and he dies.
Right after Victor passes away, Captain Walton hears this hoarse voice coming from the cabin. He walks in and finds the gigantic, distorted monster literally weeping over Victor's corpse. The monster confesses the extreme agony that his revenge actually cost him. He says, "Polluted by crimes and torn by the bitterest remorse, where can I find rest but in death?" He tells Walton that with his creator gone, his own existence is finished. He then leaps from the cabin window onto an ice raft, vowing to travel to the northernmost extremity of the globe and burn himself on a funeral pyre, never to be seen again.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with at the end of this explainer. What do we actually owe our creations? And who, in the very end, was the true monster here? Was it the hideous creature who murdered out of profound isolation, or the brilliant, ambitious scientist who brought life into the world only to immediately abandon it to the cold? I want to thank you so much for joining me for this. I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this incredible moral ambiguity, so definitely join the debate in the comments below. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.